Yay! We're almost there, people. 2 more sessions to go.
Yep, be good.
So, Rich, is one of the criteria to win the prize to be present during the prize giving?
No, that's okay.
Oh, okay. Because I remember that was the rule.
Yeah, no. So just we figured not everyone will be. It's Saturday, right? So people got family. There'll be young kids screaming for food at 5. So, but yeah, so put your name down. As long as you've got your email address, that just helps us in case there's two people called John Smith or whatever. We got that, and we can email you and get you the information out to you. It's just gonna be a bit of fun, right? Because we've got this spinning wheel that will, be like Lotto, basically. So not rigged. Although me, Hamish, and Rami are probably going to win. Just saying. But yeah.
Nice.
Okay.
Let me know when I can start, because I've only got my one laptop screen, so I don't have a second monitor here with me, so I don't know what the time is or who else is joining.
Yes, so bang on 3:00 now, so we can kick off. So for folks on the call, there'll be some that will join in a sec as well. But introduce you to Elaiza, who's going to cover off automating an insurance liability claim form. And if I saw it right, it's going to be model driven, right?
Yeah. Thanks, Rich.
We just saw Canvas.
Yeah.
So now we got model, so we get a whole bunch of how to do things differently in the platform. So it's going to be awesome to see. All right, go for it, Elaiza. Good luck.
Oh, thanks. Kia ora, everyone. Hello, everyone. I'm Elaiza, and as Rich said, I'm going to be showing how you can do some automation, but this time around we're going to do a real life form where it's going to be an insurance liability claim form, and I'm going to show you AI Builder and Power Automate. And from the front end interface, we're using a model driven app or a Dynamics 365 app. Just a little bit about me. I've been a consultant for the last 10 years. I've worked in New Zealand and in Australia. Funny thing is, I was over in Australia for over 6 years, and then I came back home to New Zealand towards the end of 2019, not knowing that there was a pandemic around the corner. So good timing on that one. I started out with Dynamics CRM4, so that was years ago. Sun and I were actually in the same Microsoft partner once upon a time. And I became interested in the Power Platform in 2018. And my story behind it is that I completed an online course. So it was an EDX course by one of our amazing community members, Shane Young. So Shane Young did an EDX course on Power Apps, Power Automate, SharePoint, and a little bit about Power BI. And that's how I fell in love with Power Automate, which was known as Microsoft Flow back then. And in my spare time, I like to go biking, and I like to cook in the kitchen, and I also like to film for my YouTube series called WTF, What the Flow. So if you haven't already subscribed to me on YouTube, please do so. Okay, so in terms of the agenda, I'm first going to talk about what is AI Builder and how you can use it. Then I'm going to cover off the prerequisites in using AI Builder, followed by the use case for what I'm going to be showing today. Then I'm going to jump straight into the demo where I'm going to show you AI Builder, Power Automate, and how it works end to end. Then I'm going to share some learning material before I open it up to the floor for questions. So AI Builder, what is it and how can you use it? I'd love to know in the comments if people are familiar with AI Builder, so I'll check those out later on. But essentially, it's a way of you being able to make your processes smarter with some enriched functionality from AI Builder models that the Microsoft Power Platform provides. In here in this screenshot, you can see that there's 5, and the one that I'm using today is AI Builder Form Processing. So AI Builder Form Processing is essentially a way for you to automatically analyze the data in a form, and then you can extract that data and move it to a particular data source. And the whole orchestration behind that is done using Power Automate. And it also stores some of that data in Dataverse in some Dataverse tables. So that's what I'm going to be going through today. And one of the key things about AI Builder is that it's what you see in the second bullet point is that it's a turnkey solution. So you don't need to be something like a machine learning expert, a data scientist, have a background in programming. Anyone can pick it up, and that's what I'm going to show you today. It is a beautiful click and point experience, and it's a matter of understanding how you want your data to be extracted, as well as how you're going to surface it up, whether it's back to a record that an end user needs to review, or whether it needs to be in a Power BI report for people to make sense of that information. And that is one of the main drivers of AI Builder. It's allowing you to pick AI up really easily without having that developer experience or a machine learning background. So in terms of the prerequisites, this is what you need. So first of all, you need a database environment. So make sure you have a Dataverse environment spun up in your own tenant. There's multiple ways of doing this. You can either sign up for a trial, you can create a new environment within your own organization tenant, but make sure you ask permission for it first. There's also a community account or environment that you can spin up as well. There are limitations around that, so just be aware. It's all documented on Microsoft documentation.com. And in terms of the user licenses, you need at least one of these that you're seeing here on screen. Note for Dynamics 365, I'm pretty sure it's Enterprise. I'm not too sure if Dynamics 365 Professional covers it. That's probably something you need to check into. And then in terms of the AI Builder capacity, you also need to buy an add-on and allocate it to a particular database environment. To figure out what type of capacity you need or how much you need, they also have provided an AI Builder calculator. So in here in this example, you enter in the estimated number of pages that you're going to process in a month, and then it's going to give you an estimate of that AI Builder add-on capacity. All right, so with those prerequisites out of the way, I'm going to talk about the use case. Now, the use case that I'm using today is for insurance organizations. Now, if you've seen my demos or if you've worked with me in the past, I like working with real life scenarios. A lot of the demos that you see by let's say experts or people online or even the Microsoft team, it's usually done with sample documents that they've created. So I wanted to put this to the real test, and I picked an insurance form that I simply found online. I'm not sponsored by this insurance company, by the way. I'm just simply using their form. So for this particular use case, we're going to use a Crombie Lockwood insurance liability claim form. And the scenario is, as a claims assessor, I need to be able to upload the submitted claim to our document repository so that I can see the claims information in our policy administration system. So this is also known as PAS for those of you who are working in insurance company today. In terms of the end users, we've got a couple here today. We've got Christy, who is the claims advisor. So she's the one who needs to review the claim once it has been submitted. And then we've got a citizen developer. So that's going to be me. And I'll show you how you could use AI Builder, the form processing model, to create that model, and then how you can utilize it in Power Automate to do the automation. Okay, so let's jump into the demo. But before we do that, I want to talk about the solution first, just so that you get an overall picture of how this works end to end. So it's going to start off in SharePoint. So SharePoint is where someone's going to upload the claim form into, and then it's going to trigger an automation. So a Cloudflow is going to be triggered. It's going to be like, hey, I can see that there's an insurance claim that's been uploaded. And then it's going to call the AI Builder form processing model. AI Builder form processing model is going to be like, sweet, I've got a claims form that I need to analyze, and then I'm going to extract that data. So that extracted data is going to live in Dataverse. But then what we're going to do is surface those information from the claim form into a model-driven app form or a Dynamics 365 app form so that Christy, the claims advisor, can see it. All right, so what I'm going to do is switch over to my browser, and I'm going to give you just a quick overview on what this looks like in a model-driven app or a Dynamics 365 app. So in here, I have some fictitious organizations. We'll head into Stark Industries, just so that you can get an idea of what this would look like in an actual PaaS system. So there's a tab in here called Insurance. And when we click on this tab, there's going to be a couple of subgrids in here where we can see the insurance policies that this member has, as well as the insurance claims that this member has done to date. Now, when we look into an actual claim, we can see that there's going to be some information on the member. It's going to give you a rundown on their insurance policy that's associated to their member account. And it also has some information about the third-party details, the nature of the claim, relevant dates, and then there's also a table in here that's going to show any claims history that this member has had in the past, as well as the direct credit details. So that's it in terms of a nutshell, in terms of what you're going to see later on. Now, the next thing that I want to show you is how you can get started with AI Builder and create the AI Builder form. So where I'm at currently is the Power Automate Maker portal. And you can also create your AI Builder form processing model in the Power Apps Maker portal. So either option is good. It doesn't matter where you do it. And then over on the left-hand side, you can see that there's an option here in the menu called AI Builder. When you click on this, it'll expand, and then you have multiple options in here. And the first one that you see is Build, and that's the one that we're going to click on. So what you're going to see next is what you saw earlier on my slides, where we're going to be presented with the different models that come with AI Builder. And the one that I mentioned earlier that we're using today in this session is form processing. So I'm going to click this, and we can go ahead and start creating our model. So I'm just going to give this a name. And before I click create, I just want to give you a run through on some great features that you see within this screen before you go and create your AI model. So in this particular tab, the Get Started tab, the product team has given some suggestions on how you can get started. So the first one is what AI Builder form processing is about. And then when you click on next, it's going to show you some steps so that you can learn and go ahead and build your first model. In the examples tab, it's going to give you some examples that you can work with. So this one is an invoice, and this one is a mortgage statement, and there's some more examples. If you want to use the sample documents to test this out yourself, you're welcome to. And then in the third tab, it also shares some best practices, which is really good. Now, with this first one that you're seeing, this one is important if you are analyzing forms where you've got different layouts. So let's say you've got an invoice form from suppliers. So supplier A could provide one type of layout and supplier B can provide another type of layout. And what this recommendation is saying is that keep them in separate collections. Basically, for every form that has the same layout, put it in one collection. And if there's another form that you're using as part of your AI Builder model, put it in a different collection. So yeah, those are the three tabs. I just wanted to make sure you're aware of them and if you wanted to do some self-learning. So the next thing that I'm going to do is click Create. And when we click Create, it will create the AI model for form processing in the background. And then it's going to show us some steps that we need to complete before we can start using this AI Builder model. The first one that it's going to prompt you to do is choose the fields that you want to extract from your form. So when you click on Add, it's going to show you some options. So what are the new features that was enabled as part of the Wave 2 release post Ignite, which was last week, is the checkbox. So previously you weren't able to use checkboxes in AI Builder form processing, but now you can. And the other one that was released earlier this year, but it's still in experimental mode, so just be aware of that, is multi-page table. So if you have a form and your table overlaps across 2 pages, this will work. And then you've got a single page table and then just a standard field. So I'm going to select field today. And then I'm going to hit next, and then this is where I can type in the details of the field. What I'm going to do is switch over to my Excel sheet and talk about one of the things that I recommend when you're using AI Builder form processing. When you are working with forms, you are presented with a bunch of fields. Let me just show you the form that I'm talking about. And the forms need to be entered in AI Builder, but one way of defining your forms is to first look at those fields to agree on what field you want to have in AI Builder to extract that information. Otherwise, if you put all of the fields in AI Builder form processing, that can work, but there may be instances where those fields are redundant. Sorry, I'm just trying to open up my form. Let's see if this one opens up. Okay, so here's an example. So this is the liability claim form that I mentioned earlier that we're going to be using. So this is a real life form. I didn't make this up. This actually exists on the website. And as you can see, there's all of these fields, but when you take a closer look at them, some of these are actually redundant, and that's why when you think about how you want to use AI Builder in your organization, you need to understand what data do we currently have for the member or on this form, and what do I actually want to bring across. So let me give you an example. In here, they're asking details about the person. However, technically, we should have information about this member in the first place, and you can find it through either their claim number or their member number. Another example is in here, it's asking the member to provide their policy details, but again, the company should already have that in their system. So really all you need is what is their policy number, because you already know in your system their limit of indemnity insurance or their excess. So it's things like that where you need to think about what information do I want to extract from this form so that our business can go ahead and streamline this process. So that's where something like Excel can come in handy, where you can agree what fields you want to extract as well as what type of field it's going to be. So for example, in here, I'm classifying that these ones are going to be checkboxes. And then down here, I've highlighted that these are a different color. And that's because if we scroll down in the form, we can see that this is a table. So then once you have your list of defined fields, it's pretty much straightforward from here. So now when I go back to my AI Builder, I can simply just copy and paste and continue adding them. So in terms of the checkbox, this one, again, is pretty straightforward. You just enter a name for that field and you click done. So that's pretty easy. The next one is a single page. Now in here is where you can define that table that you want to extract the data from. So it's going to prompt you to give the table name. The next bit is entering a name for the column. So once again, I'm going to my spreadsheet. I'm going to grab my first column in here and we'll copy and paste this. And as you can see, it's a very simple process in terms of click to point. So as you remember in my slide, I mentioned that it's a turnkey solution. So you don't need to have a programming or a machine learning background to use AI Builder. It's nicely well designed for people who don't have a programming background. Okay. So I'm not going to go ahead and create all of these fields. I'm going to jump to a model that I already have prepared. So basically, once you've created all of your fields, so it's going to look like this. The next thing that you want to do is create your collection and then upload your document. So in here, we're going to create a new collection. So as I mentioned, a collection is a way of grouping your forms that have the exact same layout for the AI Builder form processing model. So I'm just going to call this insurance liability claim form. And then the next thing that we want to do is upload some documents into this collection. Now, you have 3 different types of data sources to use in terms of where you want to grab those files from. The first one is local storage. So local storage means it's on your device. You also have the option to grab files from a SharePoint list or site, document library, and then you also have the ability to pull it from Azure Blob Storage. Today, I'm going to use local storage. I've got some forms ready to go. So here are my 5 forms that I've set up, and now I'm going to select them. And what's going to happen next is that it's going to upload the documents, and then we're going to be prompted to proceed with the next step, which is to tag the documents. So what do we mean by tag? So tagging the documents is essentially mapping the fields that you've defined in this step, so the choose information to extract step, to the actual fields on the form. Now what you're seeing in front of you is the form itself. So AI Builder Form Processing model has cleverly picked up those forms that you've uploaded, and now it's displaying it back to you so that you could do the mapping or the tagging. So I'm just going to explain a little bit about what you're seeing right now. So in the middle is the form. And then if you look over on the right, you can see that the 5 forms that you've uploaded in the previous step are now displayed. And then down below it, you could see that the fields are now presented alongside the table and the checkboxes. And the next step that we need to do is map the data that's on the form to the fields that we've defined in step number 1. Now, what you're going to see is me using my mouse. So I'm simply just using my mouse cursor, and I'm highlighting the data that I want the AI form processing model to extract. So with the name, I've highlighted it. I can now select which field I want to map it to, and I simply click name. That's it. Like it's straightforward in terms of that click and point experience that I mentioned. And another way of highlighting that data in your form is to hover your mouse cursor over the value, and if you click on it, it's going to present you with the fields that you can choose from. So again, we've got the member number. So I'm just going to scroll down and show you what the experience is like for a checkbox. So again, you select the checkbox, and then you can map it to a field. So I'm going to pause here and again talk about some things that I've noticed when working with AI Builder forms. So this is probably about the 5th form that I've done some automation with. And it goes back to how you display the data or the fields back to your end user in this digital or physical form. So you'll notice in here that you've got a yes checkbox and a no checkbox. But when you think about it, you should really only be displayed with one checkbox. It's either yes, so it's you tick it or you cross it, or if you leave it blank, then it's no. So in this particular form, for whatever reason, they've provided both checkboxes, even though technically it's not correct, if that makes sense. But anyways, we're not here to talk about this particular setup, but just keeping in mind, if you are going to be digitizing and automating one of your forms, take a step back and think about where in your form you can do some improvements to help with the automation, as well as I don't know how to say it nicely. Yeah, I'll just leave it as that. But yeah, just study your form first and think about, is there anything that we can do better? Because by having 2 checkboxes as yes and then no, it's kind of confusing, but yeah, it is what it is. Okay, now the cool thing that I also want to show you is how you can extract data from tables. So in here, I'm just highlighting the rows of data, and then you can scroll all the way down and select claims history. And in here, you're going to see the different type of user interface appear. Over on the right-hand side, it's telling you how you can define the data in this table. So it's saying add rows, click on it. And then if you want to add columns, you need to hold down the control and use your left mouse. So that's what I'm doing. So I'm just hitting control on my keyboard. And when I just click, it then creates the columns for me. So again, we're going to do it for the third column and then the final column. So again, it's that click and point experience. And then if I just click with the left side of my mouse, I can define that there's 2 rows. And now when I hit done, oh, sorry, I need to assign my headers. You just need to click on the header. So where you see the column, you click on A, and then again, it's going to display the column headers that you've defined. So automatically on the right-hand side, as soon as I select the column, it automatically extracts that data and displays it to you so that you know that it is grabbing the right value from the row as well as the column from the form. So if I just scroll across, it's correctly showing me the data. So I can also check in real time whether it's done it correctly or not. You also have the ability to ignore the first row. So in the scenario where you've highlighted the top row as well, you can enable this option. Okay, so then I click done. So you'll notice that every time I've mapped a field, it's going to show a tick, and where I have not mapped that value, it's not going to show it. So the other nice thing about the AI Builder form processing model is if any of the fields are blank, so for example, this field is blank, so this one I believe I've labeled as additional information, you can actually define whether it's not available in the document. So if I click on this, it will now be told that particular value does not exist in this form. And that's pretty much it. So you go through all of your fields, and once you've gone through all of it, you're going to see a tick in here, and then you have to progress with the remaining forms in terms of doing that mapping. So once again, I'm going to jump over to another model where I have gone through all of that mapping. Otherwise, we're going to be here for a couple longer, well, a bit more than intended. So in these forms, you can see that I've gone through all of the fields. I've marked where those fields have been blank in the form. And this now appears as a tick, and I can now continue into the next step. If you don't fill in any of these forms correctly, it's not going to show a tick, and you won't be able to proceed to the next step of the AI Builder form processing model. So keep that in mind. This button will be disabled, so make sure you fill in everything that is required. So now when I click next, it's now going to display a summary of what it has picked up. So in here, it's telling me that I've only got one collection, that I have provided 5 documents for it to analyze. It's now displaying all of the information that I've mapped in my tag document step. So I've got my fields, I've got my claim history, which is my table, and then I've got checkboxes. So really, all you need to do next is click on train, and then your model will be available to use. So what's going to happen now is that behind the scenes, the model is being trained, and the next thing it's going to say, I think, is it draft or to be published? But basically, when you click into the model after it's been trained, you can also perform a quick test to ensure that AI Builder is picking up the data correctly. So we'll just give this a few more minutes for it to change from training to trained, and then I'll show you what it looks like in terms of testing it out, and then I'll show you how you can use it in Power Automate so that you can create this beautiful end-to-end process of automating a liability claim form. Okay. Cool. So now the status has been updated to trained, and we're going to open the AI Builder form processing model. As you can see, it displays all of the information that I've defined, and in here I can perform a quick test. So if I click on this, I can upload one of those forms just to test it out. So let's select Stark Enterprises. And what it's doing right now is it's analyzing all 3 pages because that's what I've mapped. And then we'll be able to look at the data that it has picked up. So if I just scroll in, just so that you can see it better on your side, when I hover over the values that it has extracted, it's going to show me the value that it has identified, which is under that label of contact phone on the left in the pop-out. And then you can see a confidence score of 99%. So this is basically telling you how confident AI Builder has detected or identified the data, as well as the data that it has identified, which is pretty cool, right? I mean, this tech didn't exist 3 or 5 years ago, and now it does, and it's honestly amazing. And so the final step is to publish it, and then once it's published, you're pretty much good to go. So yeah, let's head over into my Cloudflow, and I'll show you what it looks like. Okay, so if you think back to my slide where I had a diagram that showed the solution, so now what we're going to do is use a Cloudflow that will be triggered when the form has been uploaded into SharePoint, and then extract the data and then service it up into a model-driven app or a Dynamics 365 app. So my trigger will be when a file is uploaded. So it's a simple trigger. We're just uploading it into SharePoint. Now, one of the connectors that is available in Power Automate is AI Builder. And the AI model that I'm selecting is my claims processing model that I created beforehand. And this is the action that you want to select from the AI Builder model. It's called extract information from forms. And then you're specifying what type of form it is. So this is a PDF document, and then it's going to ask you the form content. So in other words, it's grabbing the content from the trigger. The next one is that it's grabbing the member, and that's using the member number that it has identified from that insurance claim. And that way we don't need to extract the data that the member has provided because we already have it on system. And then we also have the insurance policy. So again, I'm grabbing the insurance policy based on that number. So where you see these dynamic content references is where I'm pulling the value from in the response of this action, which I'll show you when we go ahead and trigger the Cloudflow. The next one is the list contact row. So again, this is the contact person for the insurance claim. I've kept this simple by just finding a match using their email address, but at the enterprise level, you would do more than one criteria in terms of finding whether that contact exists or doesn't exist in your PAS, your policy administration system. Okay, the next thing that I want to talk about is date formatting. So for those of you who were paying attention, you'll probably notice that in one of the forms, I purposely left the date to be different. So let me just scroll up. So typically with forms, you would give some type of tooltip or a tip to the user on how you want the date format to be entered. Now on this side of the world, we're used to entering it as DD/ or hyphen MM/ or hyphen YYY as the year. Now, when we work with dates in systems or application, it needs it in what we call a UTC format, so Universal Coordinated Time. Now, for those of you who are developers in this call, you are probably groaning right now because you're like, oh, I hate working with date time formats. But yeah, the nice thing about Power Automate is that it makes it simple. So first of all, we need to tidy up the date value when it's in this particular format. So I'm just going to switch over to my slides to demonstrate and explain this. So in this scenario, we want to have the date value in the UTC format. So the UTC format is YYY/MM/DD, and then you have to provide like an hour and minute. That's basically the format. So when we want to tidy it up in Power Automate, there's a couple of steps that we need to do. The first one is we need to rearrange these values. So right now, my expression is, first of all, we're going to remove the brackets and we're going to replace it with a no space character. So that's step one. Let's tidy it up. The next one is so this is what it's going to look like in terms of this is what the flow is doing. Now, the next step that we need to do is now arrange those numbers so that it meets the UTC format. So in other words, we need to start with a year, followed by the month, followed by the day. So I've color coded this, and I apologize if anyone is colorblind in the attendance today. So if you look at the numbers below, this is basically a reference to where the date value is, or the integer in this string. So in other words, 02 is 01, and then 10, which is October, starts at 2 and finishes at 3. So then when we want to write our expression in Power Automate, we want to follow that format. So if you have a look at this, my first expression is basically saying to grab the year to represent the UTC format, start at 4. So we're starting at 4, and then we're grabbing the next 4 digits. So that will form 2021. And then I'm putting a hyphen in here, and then my next expression in here is grabbing the month value. So in other words, start at 2, which is 1, and then grab the next, and then grab the characters from 2 as a starting point. So in other words, grab the 10, and then we apply the same for the day. So the starting point is 0, and from there grab the 2 characters from that starting point. So then this is what you get essentially in the end. So this is how we tidy up date formats and rearrange it in a way that it can be used for UTC downstream in the Cloudflow. I hope that made sense. Okay, so I'm going to go back to my Cloudflow and we'll continue. So then the next step after we've done that tidying up, so this is where I'm removing the brackets, and then this is where I'm reorganizing it. So it starts with 2021-10-02 as a day. We're now converting it into a particular time zone. So in Dynamics 365 and in model-driven apps, it works, and pretty much in all systems, it uses UTC. So what we're doing here is we're converting the source time of New Zealand. So luckily in New Zealand, we only have one time zone, but if you live in Australia, you have, what is it, five or four? And so you convert it from the source time zone, so the time zone that you want, into UTC, and that way when the user views that date time value in Dynamics 365 or the model driven app, they'll be able to see it in the correct value that it should be in. Otherwise, if it goes in as is, in some scenarios it might appear funky based on whatever time or hour that you've provided. Okay, so once you've tidied up the date, the next thing that we're doing is we're adding a new insurance claim row. So in other words, we're creating a brand new insurance claim record. So in other words, after the AI Builder form has analyzed the data and extracted the data, and we've tidied up the dates, we now want to create a brand new record for an insurance claim. So that's what this step is doing. And again, I have some references to expression. So once again, I'm going to head over to my PowerPoint just to explain them. So things like the account number, again, if you were paying attention and looking closely at the data that it extracted, it has identified it as spaces. And that's because in this particular form, they're using boxes to prompt the user of, well, prompt the member of where they need to enter their account number in. But in terms of the AI Builder processing form model, it's picked it up as spaces. So what we're doing is, again, we're saying based on the value, which is this long piece of string that has been picked up as an account number, we want to remove the space character, and then we want to replace it with no spaces so that it could just be a single string with no spaces. So that's essentially what that expression is doing. Another one that I'm applying here is coalesce. So coalesce, I don't know how you correctly pronounce it, is basically a way for you to avoid the Cloudflow from failing. So what I mean by that is if any of these values are blank because they're not mandatory on the form, they're not required, by using this function, it protects your Cloudflow from failing, so as in from having a hard failure. So this is where this function comes in handy. If you don't provide this, then you're going to encounter an error. I'm pretty sure that there are some people in the audience that probably have experienced this, but coalesce is a way to get around it. Okay, so then the other one that I'm doing, which you can see here, is you'll notice that in the incident date, I'm referencing my action where we've done the converted time zone. For those of you who in the audience who are a bit more advanced, you can use a function called the convert time zone function. So once again, I'm just going to go to my PowerPoint just to explain that. So the convert time zone function is essentially the raw expression that that particular action uses. So this is what it is underneath the hood. It's basically saying use a convert time zone function, and we want to format it to a particular value. So in here, I've just explicitly entered a value of 9 a.m. So we're saying that convert it to that particular value, because in Dynamics 365 or in the model-driven app, I use the default date time value for a date time field, the settings in there. And the next one that I want to cover is checkboxes. So again, if we go back to the form, you can see that this form provides 2 checkboxes instead of 1. So in here, I've decided, well, I'm only ever going to look at the yes boxes. If there's a tick, then I know that it's a yes. If there is no tick, then I know it's a no. So I'm purposely ignoring these ones. So again, when you use AI Builder form processing, you got to think for a moment, how do I actually want to process the data that has been extracted? So if I scroll down to one of the checkboxes, which is this one, I'm using the if function. Once again, I'm going to head back to my PowerPoint slide so I can explain this in a way that you guys understand. Okay, so this is what my expression looks like. I'm saying if, and then again, we're grabbing the data that the form processing model has identified. And in the form processing model, it's always going to return 2 values. So it's either going to be true, which means it has been ticked, or false. In other words, this isn't ticked. So we're saying that if the value returned is true, then we want to set the value to yes in Dataverse. Otherwise, if it's false, then we're saying that we want to set it to no in Dataverse. So in the response, this is what it looks like. So in other words, if it's true, we're going to set it to yes in Dataverse or Dynamics 365. And if it's false, then we're going to set it to no in Dataverse or Dynamics 365. Okay, so then the very last expression that I do want to explain, and then we're going to see it end to end, I promise, just bear with me, is how to reference values when you're working with the list row action. So for those of you who are familiar with the list row action in Power Automate, sometimes you'll get the apply to each appearing, and you may find that annoying, and you're probably thinking, why does it apply to each appear? And that's because when you use a list row action, it's returning the response in a way where it's grabbing multiple records. So if you use the get row action, that's a single record. If you use the list row action, that's multiple records. So in other words, it's going to return it in a form where it's an array. So an array, in other words, is essentially like a table. So for every row that you see in the array, just think of it as a table. It's a row in a table. And when you just reference a property from the response in here, so let's say it's, something like the account number or the account name, Power Automate will go, well, I need to now give them an apply to each action so that they can only pull through the value that they need from each row in this table that I've returned to them. So to avoid that, that's where we use a function called first. So the first function will only ever grab me the value from the first row in this response or row that it has returned. And this is useful because it bypasses that apply to each from appearing and stunning you. So you're like, ugh. So this avoids that. And I have talked about this before in one of my episodes in my YouTube channel, and where I go into it in detail. So once again, I'm going to head over to my PowerPoint and just explain it. Okay, so this is what I meant by the list member row action. It's returning the response in a way where it's going to show multiple rows in the response, and you know that because the hint here is that it's going to start with a square bracket. So then, the example in here is we're pulling the member number or the claim number, and in here I'm saying only grab the ID where it is from the first row in that list row action. And we know that it's only ever going to grab one row because of my filter query, where I've defined only grab the member where the account number equals this value that it has extracted from AI Builder. So to explain this expression, we're using the first function. So in other words, retrieve the first row in the response. Then we're saying only grab this property, so the account ID from that first row. And if you want to learn more about the method to avoid the apply to each, just scan this QR code here on screen, and that'll take you to my episode where you can learn more about it. Okay, so then the final step that we have in our Cloudflow, once we've pulled in all of the details, is to create our claims history rows. So in Dataverse or in my Dynamics 365 app, I have a separate table called Claims History, which is associated to the insurance claim. And in here is where we're going through the different rows that the AI Builder model has identified. And so for each row in that form, in that claim history table, it's going to create a brand new row. And the same thing here, I'm using the coalesce, and instead of providing a blank value in here, I'm just saying just put a value of 0 against the amount outstanding. And in here, we're linking it back to the insurance claim that we have provided. All right, so that's the Cloudflow. I'm now going to head over to SharePoint, and I'm going to upload the form so that we can see it in action. So in here, I'm going to choose Stark Enterprises. I'm going to click Open. So now it's going to upload it into SharePoint. We can see that the form has now been uploaded. And I'm going to go back to my Cloudflow. And we're going to see that my Cloudflow has been triggered. So just give it a few seconds. Does anybody have elevator music that they want to play or sing? Come on. Oh man. Okay. Keep going. I feel like there's some people in the audience that are like, I know exactly how she's feeling right now. Hitting the refresh button constantly, hashtag this is my life. What is going on? Let me try upload another one. Okay, I'm just going to let that run in the background. So what I will do is head back to my slides and we'll check back on it later. So what I did want to share with you in terms of the learning material for AI Builder is a couple of sources. So the first one is in the Microsoft Learn site, they do have a module on AI Builder. So the first module that I recommend is getting started with AI Builder, and then follow the other modules that exist. The second one is the AI Builder Labs. So there are hands-on labs that you can also follow to get started. And then there's also Steve Winward, who has done a YouTube video on how you can process forms that have tables with AI Builder form processing. So again, just grab your phone, scan the QR code that you see here on screen. The next one is there's also the document automation toolkit solution. So this was released early this year by the product team, and this has a bit more detail than building an AI Builder form from scratch. So the document automation toolkit exists today where you can just hit the ground running in terms of getting automation. I've done a webinar on it in September. So again, if you want to watch that recording and learn more about the document automation toolkit, just scan the QR code here. And in this particular demo, I used a real life form. So that was a Quebec revenue form. So that was a government department form that I had automated. So yeah, if you want to learn about it, I highly recommend that you check it out. So let me head back to my Cloudflow and see what's going on. Okay, so it looks like it has processed now. So let's head over to my model-driven app. And what I'll do is hit refresh. And if we just sort this from newest to oldest, we can see my two forms that it has processed. So now if I open up Stark Industries, we can see that from Power Automate, it's mapped everything that I've defined it to, as well as it's correctly identified the data and extracted the data from the form and inserted it into Dataverse or Dynamics 365. So it's grabbed the member correctly by finding the member using the member number. It's grabbed the correct insurance policy by finding the insurance policy based on the number that was provided in the form. We can see that the checkboxes are correctly mapped as well. And then when we scroll down, we can see that the date values have come through. And then when we look at the claims history, we can see that the rows in the claims history table has correctly been identified as well as linked to the particular insurance claim. So a couple of things that come to mind that I want to leave you with is when you are working with some automation with AI Builder form processing, you want to test it on quite a number of different ranges of records, so different, let's say, permutations of forms that you do receive, just to make sure that the data that you do, just to make sure that the data that AI Builder form processing extracts is in fact correct. Test with forms where you've also filled in all of the fields, so that when you train the AI Builder model, it also knows what to expect when it receives a form that has completely been filled. The other thing that is also good to build into your automation is looking at the confidence score. So if I just go back in here and we have a look at the histories, just so that you know what I'm talking about. By checking the confidence score, it allows you to also do some alerts where if the confidence score is low, so I'll just wait for this to load. Where did it go? So here, 0.99, so that's a pretty high score. So if you want to put some extra rules in here as part of your automation, where if it's 0.5 and below, go and alert someone, then that's something that I highly recommend, especially if it's a business critical type of automation. And speaking of business critical, everything that I've shown you here today in terms of the automation works fine. But at the enterprise level, just please make sure that you also incorporate error handling in your automation, because if it is a business critical type of automation, then you want to know when something has failed. And yeah, that's what I wanted to share today. I hope I didn't lose you at times. Yeah, sometimes it can be a bit difficult in explaining expressions. So I hope I did an okay job in explaining it. So I'm going to head over to the chat window and see what questions might have been raised. So I'll stop sharing my screen and I'll start from the top. So comment from Ralph. Great presentation, Eliza. What do I need to do when the form wasn't filled out on the computer, e.g. I need to process handwriting? So the answer to this question is that it picks up both digital and handwritten forms. So I did test this out last year when it was first released with the New Zealand IRD declaration form in terms of your text. You know, the one where you provide, M or MSL. So I tested it with that and it picks up both handwritten and digital forms. I've had another question asked in another webinar where how do they make the AI Builder form model recognize different different handwriting? And the answer is, again, upload forms that have different formats of handwriting so that it can be trained. The other question that I have been asked as well is, after I've trained the AI Builder model form, is that it? Like, can I upload any more forms to train it? The answer is absolutely. You can always go back to your original models that you trained and continuously upload forms with different types of handwriting or even different collections so that it keeps getting smarter and better when you throw something else at it. And yeah, I hope that makes sense. Oh, another question that I have been asked. So we had like a viewer from Germany in the past, and his question was, can it understand different languages? The answer is yes. So there is a blog post on the Power Apps blog site, the official one, where they have done a release. I think it was in August or possibly June. They now support different languages. I can't remember the exact number of languages, but it'll continue to grow, basically. Yeah, that was me answering that question. Does anyone want to come off mute as well and ask me a question while we're on air? Feel free to do so.
Hey, Elaiza.
Hey.
What did I miss?
Watch the recording. It's the right answer.
I will. Sorry, I just sort of swapped streams between myself and Richard. I was hoping he would join earlier, but he was just enjoying your session way too much that he basically ignored me, and he just jumped right there. Do we have any more questions from the audience? Feel free to sort of go off mute and have a chat.
But yeah, if any of you guys want to connect with me or get some of the expressions that I shared with you today, feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn or on Twitter. I'll provide my details once I go off air. But again, thank you so much. And I do have an episode coming out next week, and it's going to be on the document automation toolkit and how you can extend it. So keep your eyes posted. It will be published soon. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Elaiza.
Oh, thank you, Eric.
Pleasure.
Thank you, Eric. I loved your session, by the way. We've never met before, and that was the first time I've seen you present, and you did a really good job in explaining how to create your custom connectors as well as work with the Azure PIM. So good job.
Thanks, Elaiza.